Do you have a hard time returning from rest? Maybe it's traveling or vacation or even a business trip. Is it hard for you to re enter your work from being away? Well, this episode's going to be a little bit different than our usual episodes because in this one, I'm going to share four key tips that I follow for returning gracefully from rest. Can't wait to see how this resonates with you. In recent weeks, I've been traveling a lot. And most recently, my husband and I enjoyed a week away in the Caribbean with good friends of ours when we completely shut down. And I have always found it a challenge to return to work gracefully. But in recent years, the Lord has given me a clear way to do that. See, I don't know about you, but I spent a lot of scary Sunday evenings looking ahead to Monday, grimacing, disgruntled, and really unhappy about going back to work, whether it was just from the weekend or from being away. And I found that Mondays were sort of my nemesis. It was a day that I just tumbled into the driving and striving efforts that I always had and found myself exhausted by the end of the day. A few years ago, the Lord had me bookend my week with quiet Mondays and Fridays and no meetings. I call Mondays my CEO day. It's the day that I can get some administrative things done, but also that I can strategize and daydream and be visionary with the Lord without the interruption of meetings, calls, etc. And so therefore generally I try to schedule my travel with that in mind, coming back on a weekend so that I know that I have Monday to look forward to. However, this last trip was a Wednesday to Wednesday. And so, how can you re enter or return to work gracefully after a restful period? Well, let me start with just saying a few things about rest. Because, see, as high achievers, we know that it's sometimes tough for us to rest and tough for us to work from a place of rest. I talked about rest a lot in episode 252. I'll put the link in the show notes, as well as episode 13 of my C Suite for Christ Focus 15 for Faith and Business series. And I'll include that link as well. And next episode, I'm going to be talking about the book Sacred Rest by Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith and some excerpts from that leading into my interview of Dr. Dalton Smith later this month. So you don't want to miss that. But the Lord calls us to Sabbath. He gives us Sabbath to teach us how to be surrendered and to trust Him. In fact, it is the one thing that was missing from creation that we learn in Genesis is the last piece of the puzzle that He puts in place so that we will honor Him and that we will glorify Him and knowing that He blesses our rest. But rest can be hard, right? So, with that background, let's talk about why we have such a hard time returning gracefully from rest. Well, I don't know about you, friends, but sometimes I'm a little disgruntled about having to come back from rest. I like my downtime. I like to be in renewal and recovery. And to take that rest is important to me. It makes me fresher for the work that I have to do. And I'm eternally grateful that the Lord gives me space for rest. So sometimes I don't like to come back, but coming back is part of doing the work that He's given us to do, the assignment that He's given us. But see, we've been so tied up in how the world tells us that we have to hustle till our haters ask if we're hiring, that we have to be constantly working, that we have to run with the big dogs, whoever those big dogs are, and that we have to be going constantly. And you know that my message is all about redefining that concept of hustle so we can navigate success with Jesus. But part of that responsibility that He's given us in our assignment is coming back to work, refreshed and renewed. So here's what I've learned: 4 tips for you to return gracefully. Number 1, plan ahead. What does absolutely have to be done before you go, and what can actually wait until you get back? Generally, I like to get as much done as possible before I go. And that means recording podcast episodes, doing my email writing, my blog writing, etc., far in advance. And that can be really good. But sometimes it just cannot all fit together. And so in this case, before I went on vacation, I decided to leave recording of this specific episode until I got back. So plan ahead, take a look at what needs to be done while you're gone and immediately upon your return, and spread that time out. Don't put it all in one day, because I promise you, if you do put it all in one day, you're going to be coming back resenting yourself for making everything happen piled on top of each other as soon as you get back. So plan ahead. Understand what has to be done before you go and what actually can wait. Parting Part of planning ahead is number 2, delegate or decline. So what do I mean by this? Well, we all know what delegating means, right? It's handing off that work to someone that can be trusted to work with the level of excellence that you have instilled for your business. But what will you delegate and to whom? Sometimes at this place, we begin to understand what needs to actually be outsourced and where do we need to make investments in outsourcing versus what needs to be done by us. So for me, for example, I outsource all of my podcast editing. Could I do it? Sure. Do I want to do it? No. So I outsource it. But I don't outsource my social media because A, I'm not on social media that much. And B, I'm really thoughtful about when I'm to be on social media, when the Lord gives me something specific to share. And so I don't outsource that. And guess what? I don't even schedule it anymore, because I found that the scheduling of it was making me even more anxious because I had to get it all done. So think about what could be delegated. And oh, by the way, this is a great time to think about, do you have someone to delegate to? Because if you're finding that you're stressed and anxious because you actually don't have someone to delegate to, then really sit down with the Lord. And I would say with your coach, by the way, I can help you with this, and understand what needs to be delegated versus declined. What does declined mean? Well, what can you say no to? One of my clients is building her coaching business around helping high achieving women understand how to give their best yes versus their disgruntled yes. What do I mean by that? Well, what she means by that is often we say yes to things when we want to say no. So, what do you need to decline? There were meetings that I needed to decline that I didn't want to push to the week I got back. But then when I looked at my calendar, I realized it didn't make sense to have those meetings now. I could be having them in November or December. So, get really clear on what needs to be delegated or declined. It's okay to say no, my friends, to give the Lord your best yes. Number 3, set boundaries and stick to them. What are the boundaries around your time? When are you leaving? When are you returning? If you're returning midweek, like I did this time, did I set some boundaries around the day after I was returning? Absolutely. I blocked that whole day because I knew that I wasn't going to be at my very best to jump right back into work and begin to work with clients immediately. So where are you setting the boundaries of your trip? Another friend of mine, when she travels, takes 2 days before she travels off, and then she takes 2 days after she travels when she returns. Not everyone can do that, and I understand that. But what boundaries are you not adhering to? Don't just put them on paper or put them on your calendar. You have to stick to them. And the accountability to stick to those times and those boundaries is critically important. Where are you preserving time for your graceful re-entry, your graceful return to work? Are you hitting the ground running? Listen, the enemy wants you to believe that if you don't hit the ground running, that you've been away and everything's falling apart, and that if you don't hit the ground running as soon as you return, then your business is going to go downhill or you're lazy. That is a lie from the pit of hell, my friends. So make sure that you're preserving time and bookending your time away, and setting those boundaries and sticking to them. Lastly, allow margin, not just margin in your time, but margin for what the Lord wants to do. Surrendering your good plans for His best plans, because you never know how He's going to move your schedule around to allow the space for what He wants done. So I came back to a few deadlines for a consulting client. And so while I did block off the day after I returned, that was also the deadline for submission of information from some companies that my client is exploring. And I knew that I wasn't going to get to start looking at those submissions until 2 days after I had returned. But I was all jumbled up, all anxious and white knuckling my calendar, if you will, looking ahead to the Friday because I knew I was going to have to fit in looking at these submissions. But I also knew that I had other things on my calendar that were also priorities, right? So juggling those priorities. But my number one priority is the Lord. So as I got up that Friday morning to begin to take a look at these submissions from these suppliers for my client, I thought, Lord, just show me where you want me to go today. And if it can't all fit in, this is your business and this is your time. And let me tell you what happens. He actually moved a meeting that I had with the client to a week later than planned, which then gave me an extra week to take a look at these submissions. Now I'm sticking to my client's timeline, but they shifted the timeline. And all I could do when I saw that happen before my eyes was go, Lord, you moved that off my calendar today so that I could be prioritizing what you want me to be looking at, not me. So allowing margin for the Lord to move and allowing margin for him to move starts with seeking him first. Seeking him first and what he wants you to do and with whom and when. You may have heard me interview Shay Bynes of Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur back in March, I think, of this year. And one of the things that she talked about is her daily business meeting with the Lord. And I have been incorporating that for a long time. I just hadn't called it that. So are you taking that time every morning for a daily business meeting with your true CEO and leader, the Lord, and allowing the margin for him to move things around the way that he wants to move them? Here's the thing, friends. These 4 tips for graceful return after rest: planning ahead, delegating or declining, setting boundaries and sticking to them, and allowing margin, all starts with that daily business meeting with the Lord and seeking him first. There is a reason that Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added onto you, is so often quoted, but so often misunderstood, because it's not all the things of your business and the client list and the followers and the income and the revenue. That's not what's added to you. What's added to you is exactly what you need, that the Lord knows that you need. You may think you need all those other things for your business, but the Lord has chosen you to be his co-laborer in the assignment that he's given you. So seeking him first is critical for all of these things. I hope that this episode has brought you some respite, has brought you some relief in knowing that you can return gracefully, that it doesn't have to be a mad scramble and a frantic pace to come back to work. That's just going to make you resent being away, and it's going to possibly put you in a place where you're not even willing to take the rest that the Lord so wants to give you. Friends, this is how you return gracefully, by doing these things and by seeking him first in all of it. As I always say, remember that God made you ambitious, but he didn't make you to work the world's way. And I'm the coach that helps you break free from business as usual. Business as usual is returning from vacation and hitting the ground running. The Lord didn't make you specifically to do it that way. So until we're together next time, I pray for and encourage you. Just tune out the world, tune into God's truth, and turn up your focus so that you can walk out his kingdom assignment for maximum impact and return to work gracefully after you've rested. I'll see you on the next episode.